They've had a great course with some great instructors, with great dialogue and interaction with each other. I'm sure they've learned from each other as well as they've learned from the people who have presented to them. And they're here at the end of that journey. They have one more class. They're about to graduate. They have a great class project they're going to tell us about at the end of the program. But for this part of the segment, before we get to their announcement about their class project, you can be part of it and join in, I want them to really talk about their experience through the Institute and really what does leadership mean to them, particularly as young African Americans facing the challenges that our people are facing in the complex social, economic, and political reality in which we live today as Houstonians and in the United States and abroad. What does it really mean to seize the mantle of leadership in this environment? To join us in this great dialogue and discussion today is Deshaun Thomas, Bethany Franklin, and Harold Steele. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you for having us.
It's great to have you here. I followed with great gleam, almost in some ways like a parent, because I've kind of been involved with this project off and on for years, and to see it finally come into fruition has been really great. So tell us about it. And any one of you that want to start, what's been the hallmark for you of this program so far? Start with Lena first.
All right. I would say I'm originally from Michigan, so I've been here about 4 years. And HBLI has definitely provided the platform to learn more about the Black community of Houston. And not only that, but the rich history that's here, the different wards, and just different things that I had no idea that existed. And not only that, but just as far as providing the platform to, bridge the gap between the leaders that are there today and us, the high potentials that are coming up, and going to slowly be taking the reins, hopefully.
Right. And you each, before you even joined this inaugural class, you've all been very involved in community issues already and doing some great volunteer work. How does all that kind of rolled into now what you've seen and experienced in each one of the class segments about how does it begin to fit together in your estimate?
I think one of the best things that we got out of it is, like you said, it does all start to come together because we've been able to been introduced to some different people in various circles and whatnot that can help us to be able to institute some change in the Black community and whatnot. I think, like you said, all of us have been involved in different things in the community. Part of this program has opened our eyes to different needs that we have in terms of, for instance, I didn't know some of the educational needs that we just talked about, over the last couple of weeks in the class, and had some different people come in and speak to our class about that I just really wasn't aware of. And now also having resources open to us that we can go back into the community and try to either help to assist some of the programs that are already in place or create some ideas of our own.
And the education piece is so important. And the second era of resegregation of our public schools here in Houston, it becomes a challenge for any community, and particularly in this case the African American community, to rise up to meet that challenge, because in the first era of segregation, you had a community that took in that school, undergirded and nurtured that school. From the churches to the small businesses to the mom and pop businesses, they were engaged. You don't have that anymore, because so many of those residents don't even live in those neighborhoods around those schools anymore. So how do you see it, Deshaun, in this kind of looking at where we were, where we are, and what we need to do now?
Well, I've seen the history of it. I grew up in Houston, grew up basically in the North Forest area, and the way it looks and the way it was taught to me was that you had the doctor staying next to the lawyer, who stayed next to the janitor, who stayed next to the teacher, and so all of their children grew up together regardless of who they were. And then when integration came in, all the kids moved out, and we wonder what happened to our communities.
Right.
And today we have it to where HIC is closing our schools and our neighborhoods because of low enrollment, and then people want to come up and shout about it, but by then it's too late, because we haven't been taught the rich history of it. And that's why HBLI is so important, is because we get that history aspect of it. We understand the concept of where we need to go from here, and we as leaders, future leaders, take on the mantle and go forward.
So history informs the past to give us an understanding of the present, to give us a brighter future. So what do you see coming out of all of this that you individually or collectively as your group are going to be called on to do more of?
One of the things that I know we are starting to do now is that we are reaching out to one another and we're picking each other up. So the way we look at it is, if one of us gets in somewhere, we all need to come in together. And so, for example, if I become mayor of the city of Houston, they should expect phone calls from me to answer
I like it. It's a good goal.
I wouldn't be
You know,
surprised
I
either.
talked to Harold about real estate development and things that the city, different parts of the city needs.
Right.
Going to Bethany about hospitality and how some of our hotels and major corporations can come in to redevelop some of our certain areas instead of always using taxpayer bases to pay for everything.
And to piggyback off of that, really what Tashawn was saying is that, you know, we get to a certain status, we get to a certain level, and we forget to give back to the community.
Yes.
You know, and it's not saying that, okay, you forgot where you come from, but you have to turn around and you know, lend that hand
Right.
and bring other people up. And I think that's one thing with our class of 14 of us, we all have different strengths. And it allows us to, you know, pull from each other and say, okay, you know, this is how we can help each other and take it to the next level.
I think most people have intentions of, hey, when I get to a certain level, I'm going to give back to the community, right?
Mhm.
But I think life happens, and it's got to be something that you have to not just have intentions, but really take an active role in just doing it, right? Because like I said, we all
Yeah.
have ideas in our head of, hey, what we would like to do, but oftentimes you just don't
Yeah,
do it.
intentionality and mindfulness, those two words connected
Right.
together, really will keep you grounded in trying to make sure you make the time, create the time to give back. Because, you know, on this show, I've said many, many times, we're put on the face of the earth for one reason only, to serve our fellow human being. And at the end of the day, that's the hallmark of what we have done and what we've been put on the face of the earth to do. But to do that with family and work and other things that get in the way, so to speak, of that goal, you have to really be mindful and do it with intention to really work out how to make that happen.
Right.
And I think individually and collectively, you said it so well that, you know, you have gone through this great leadership thing, and the leadership piece says, basically, what are core values? What are the core values that individually and collectively this group has decided they want to focus on? And I'm sure y'all have talked about that, individually and collectively.
Yes.
So I'm just curious, what have been some of those core values that have surfaced?
I think one of them is economic empowerment. I think just as a whole, as the black community is about last in just about every major category that matters in terms of wealth and economic empowerment. And I think as a class, we've decided that we want to focus on that being one of the first areas that we feel like we can affect change and make a difference is by helping to bring financial education and just
Right.
economic empowerment opportunities to get them out there in the community.
Now, you talked about economic development, you talked about real estate development, you know, the great food deserts across the communities in certain parts of our community. The real estate piece, as you well know, is a moving target. To bring in something like a hotel would be great. And I'm sure that each one of you involved in different skill sets you have talked about what can you do, and I'm going to talk about your project in a minute, but before we get to that, what else did y'all talk about that might be possible that you as a group could generate some dialogue and discussion around that then may lead to some significant change in particular areas?
Well, the history and education piece overall.
Okay.
For example, most people have no earthly idea why we call the different wards by their different names.
Right, exactly.
We learned that in our class setting and why the different African Americans settled and that type of information. But one of the things that also is impacted into that is how we as future leaders can continue the traditions of our African American heritage,
Good point.
and how even though we live in an integrated society, we can still keep ourselves grounded and rooted in the African American spirit.
And I really think part of that is just cultivating the history and starting with the youth. For example, us, I mean, it's not too late even with us, but starting
Right.
in high school even. Because,
Earlier
you
the
know,
better,
from there
yes.
you're going to college, you're starting to make your own
Yeah.
decisions. And from there, I think it's just educating, whether it's, again, you know, financial education. It's alarming to see how many people do not have a bank account.
Right.
Something that I would
Right.
say most college graduate, you know, students take for granted.
And if you don't know your history, you're doomed to failure, and you're doomed to repeat the same history mistakes, you know. And I think it's important to understand who heroes and sheroes were in our community, who led that way, who laid that foundation. Because I'm always amazed every Black History Month that rolls around every year. I go out and talk to schools, as we all do, I'm sure, to kids, and I'll mention certain people's names. Don't have a clue. I mean, there's a whole generation that has no idea. I'm just talking about leaders in this community 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 40 years ago. Have no idea. And so I think part of that leadership example is to explain that history and heritage and to pass that on and understand that connectiveness to what we're doing today, what you're being able to achieve today, is on the backs and the shoulders of those who've come before you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And one thing I think too is good about our group and the leadership opportunities that may come out of it. I know Tashawn has some different aspirations in terms of politics and whatnot. We all come from different backgrounds and have different experiences. So like myself being in the real estate industry, I know that I feel like the housing gap that you see in the black community is really the start, right? Because for the average American, the majority of their wealth is tied up into their real estate equity.
Before we go, we have a great project coming up. You want to invite people to this coming Saturday, so tell us quickly. We got enough time to get it in quickly.
Well, we are hosting the first ever Unity Day, where it will be April the 5th, and it will be from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And we'll be financial literacy programs, housing programs. So anything you want to know about banking and the economic insurance of our community, please come out and join us.
This is Saturday, 10 a.m. at our traditionally, historically African-American Black Bank, Unity National Bank, 2602 Blotchet Street in the heart of 3rd Ward.
Yes.
All right, that's correct.
I want to thank you all for being here.
Thank you,
It's a
Larry.
great pleasure to have the first members of the new cohort group of the Leadership Institute from the Greater Houston Black Chamber, Houston Black Leadership Institute, and the inaugural class. Thank you. We'll be following you. We'll be working with you going forward, and we're going to see kind of what this class does individually and collectively, and we're going to follow that journey together. So thank you again.
We thank you for having us.
Part of the skill sets that they have talked about is the ability to show up, stand up, and speak up, because that's really what it boils down to if you're looking to make change. The ability to do your homework, have the skills, be willing to show up when you need to show up, stand up at the meeting and speak the truth. It's always been about truth to power, about developing the beloved community, about being able to talk about we and us and not I and me. We look forward to you joining us in future segments of Dialogue Houston. It's always a pleasure to come to you every week. And until then, as always, peace, power,